We've been talking about this Department of War. So we won the First World War, we won the Second World War, we won everything before that and in between, and then we decided to go woke and we changed the name to Department of Defense. So we're going Department of War.
We're looking at Donald Trump announcing that the Department of Defense is now being called the Department of War. We're going to look at the history. Does it need congressional approval? And what does the left and right side have to say about it? So first of all, the Department of Defense was first actually called Department of War. It was created in 1789. It kept that name until 1947. In 1947, we had just finished World War II. Truman was our president, and we just had nuclear weapons. He did not want to have this offensive look at our War Department. He didn't want it to look like we're going to go at war with Soviet Union. So he called it a different name in 1947. They called it the National Military Establishment, the NME. Congress did not like that name. It literally says NME in the acronym. So 2 years later, in 1949, they called it the Department of Defense, and that's been its name ever since. So can Trump actually call it Department of War now?
Well, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth say they are building a so-called warrior ethos. They're toughening the U.S. military, and the new name allows them to project victory, as President Trump said, strength, as President Trump said in the Oval Office yesterday, and a more forceful image of the U.S. military. Practically day to day, it remains to be seen how widespread this change will be. Right now, it is limited to some signage in the Pentagon.
Technically, Trump cannot legally change the name from Department of Defense to Department of War. His action does allow the Department of Defense to ceremoniously use the name Department of War. So on their letters, on their signage, on random things, they can use the name Department of War, but it actually needs congressional approval. Now, when it was first announced, I had friends texting me, hey, did you hear that it's going to be called the Department of War? And they were like, it looks like President Trump is going to take an offensive take at our War Department or our Defense Department. So Department of Defense says, hey, we're going to defend our homeland. If you attack us, we will not let you attack us. And they were saying, hey, Department of War sounds like what he's saying is we're going to take the offensive side, maybe invade, attack other countries that we perceive as potential threats. Here are a couple opinions from the left.
President Trump said the decision to send the troops to Chicago was, quote, not a political thing. And today said, quote, Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War, with that, I don't know how to describe that tweet right there. But anyway, what's your response? Because your district covers parts of Chicago as well as surrounding neighborhoods. What are you telling your constituents?
Look, this is the act of a tyrant. This is the act of a bully. It has nothing to do with reducing crime. Wherever the trends are, Chicago acknowledges it can always do better. But for the money they spent deploying the National Guard in Los Angeles, Chicago could have hired 2,000 more police officers.
So recently, President Trump took troops into Washington, D.C. There was a lot of crime rates that Trump reported from Washington, D.C., so he took troops in, and a lot of those crime numbers came down, and there was actual congressional ability for the president to be able to go into Chicago. There was an act, an emergency act for Washington, D.C. that allows the president to come into the capital city under an emergency situation. After that, President Trump is now saying that he wants to come into some of these other major cities with higher crime rates, like Chicago. These leaders are saying that he has no ability from Congress, from the Constitution, to actually go inside of these sovereign cities under these sovereign states and to go in and take control with the National Guard. President Trump is now kind of laughing, saying they're going to find out why it's called the Department of War. We're going to see if this is really the take he's going to have. Here's some more opinion on that.
The words do matter. So Department of Defense actually seems to say this is as much as a war department. It's a department for telling people that we're going to defend our country, for deterrence. And it just feels like it's kind of an old man reminiscing about the days of old, the Department of War, and trying to cover for weakness.
Right. So the left is saying, hey, it sounds like what it's going on is that Trump wants to take over other countries, that he wants to take over other territories. He's talked about Greenland, Canada. Now he's talking about Mexico. He's talking about other countries. So he wants to go in and push, maybe sort of like the Iranian bombs This is what the left is saying, that it shouldn't be called the Department of War. It should be called the Department of Defense. Now, the right has a different take on it. We'll see that here.
So I see this as about getting back to mission, Laura, which is about recruiting war fighters who are going to fight the wars that protect America. And, you know, what Biden did for the last 4 years by turning the military into a giant DEI seminar has got to end. I mean, you think about it. They were conducting transgender surgeries in the military and military facilities. We were paying for abortions for military members, service members, who knows who else that we're getting this kind of funding for these kind of projects. It's outrageous. It's totally outrageous. They should be defending America. To me, that's what this is all about. I welcome the change.
The Republican view is that this is a continuation of the Trump's push to make the military stronger again. They saw the military as weak under President Biden, so they're saying, hey, we need different standards. He brought Pete Hegseth in, who brought different physical testing standards for the military, different rules that the military had to abide by. And now they're saying we want to change the name to make the Department of War seem a feared might and force all across the world. Now, the question is, how will this affect our relationship with other countries? Will they be more afraid to have diplomacy with us now that we're called the Department of War? Will they be afraid that we're going to attack if they don't agree with us? Here is the Republican take on that.
This idea that we have to interpret this somehow as diplomacy is out, soft power is out. Respond to that, because that is the drumbeat we've heard all day long.
Well, this is why we have the Department of State, as you pointed out just a moment ago. I mean, this is why we have Marco Rubio and whole teams of ambassadors all across the world who are doing a great job. And of course, as you also said, the president is a skilled negotiator. He loves to negotiate. He's done it already to great effect in his first few months of this second term. So listen, the idea that we're not going to negotiate is ridiculous. But here's the thing. You have to have a credible threat in order to make the negotiations real. And people need to fear the United States again. They need to see that we have the most lethal military on the face of the earth, and that when we make a threat, we're serious about it. I think Trump is demonstrating that. I think this change is going to put a fine point on it.
A lot of the comments I'm seeing online about this is that, hey, because this isn't actually a congressional name change, then the next president can come in and easily make an executive order and just say, hey, we're not going to call it the Department of War anymore. We're going to call it the Department of Defense. So I'm assuming that Trump's next action is to push Congress in the next couple of years to actually change it to Department of War, or it's just going to be changed back the next time a Democrat becomes president. We will see. I want to know your opinion. Do you think it should be called Department of War, Department of Defense, or do you think it even matters? Do you think Congress is going to vote on having it actually changed? What do you think? Put your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with a friend. I'll see you next time.